at it again, Kofa conversations that are about community, conversations that are about connection, and conversations that are about our constant desire to want to continue to make progress. And we have with us another servant of the people, servant of this community, none other than retired Dallas police officer, Mr. Corporal James Allen, has decided to sit down with us and share a little bit with us about his own unique history, but also about his time as a Dallas police officer serving in this city, as it has within it some very interesting things that many officers probably experience, but obviously unique to his experience. And so we look to learn a lot from him today. How you doing, D?
I'm straight, man. I'm ready to get into it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, Corporal Allen, thank you so much for sitting down with us for a conversation. So, as we do in the tradition of what the restaurant is about, Sankofa, right, knowing that we can't go forward without looking back, right. Always want to start our conversations kind of with just finding out about your unique history. Since you're not a Dallas native, could you give us a little background about where you grew up, how you grew up, and then we'll get into a little bit more about your unique time in this city.
No problem, sir. And just thank both of you for inviting me, because again, I love sharing my conversation because it's part of history, it's part of my life. But my background is that I was born and raised in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and we call it Hard Time, Mississippi, and I was born in the mid-50s. So during that time period, as I grew up, knowing the boundaries that were set for black people during that time, it was told to us, myself and my siblings and others, as we grew up, you can't do so and so, because again, you still was dealing in a environment that had a culture of white people dominated, and they expected you to bow down to them per se. So during that time period, as I grew up, as I was growing older, I learned from my parents, my mother especially. I learned from the neighborhood. I learned from my uncles and aunt is that you can either bow down to the system or you can take a stand on issues. But when I did take stand on issues as a young child, they taught me on how to demonstrate, to protest, even going down, I think it was like about 3 or 4 years old, something like that. I remember the first protest I went downtown with my mom, and we were walking downtown Vicksburg, protest and demonstration. And that had to be probably like in like 1958, 59. And that memory still stays with me right then.
Right.
And so growing up there, I experienced a lot of things, understanding, growing up in Mississippi in my time period, it was probably not until the early 60s before we had inside running water. Wow. We were still dealing with outhouses and Vicksburg in my home at that time. So it was like the early 60s, before we even had a running water inside the house. So the key thing about growing up in Vicksburg is that you were, the area that we was in was a community. It was a close-knit community. Black people that had came from different plantations. And I was fortunate and blessed for my uncle passed here some years ago to take me back to the plantation that our family came from. And finding out that as we found out our community and was able to buy houses and stuff like that, at some point, some of them was run down, the older homes that really run down, but we repaired those homes so it was fit for us. So it was like 8 of us in one household where I came up. It was only a 2-bedroom house. My mom, my stepdad had one, and then initially it was 6 siblings stayed in one room, and then eventually 8 siblings stayed in a room. So when the girls got older, my mom, what she did is we converted the front porch into a bedroom for the girls to separate them from the boys. Right. So when you talk about siblings growing up in a household, we was real close at that time, and we say again, I thought I understood my boundaries, but I didn't understand my boundaries because I figured that why we have to do this and they don't have to do. So when I said they, white folks have to do A, B, and C. So again, I became very conscious of that. The neighborhood in itself that I grew up in, it was really important because we was a community. And when I say community, we helped each other. Somebody needed, let's say, some bread or some sugar or some rice, then we can go to that neighborhood, the other person in our neighborhood and say, hey, I need some rice. Right. Miss Washington, you have some rice, like they can cook in the season. If somebody needs some help with their bill or something, they didn't have the money for their electric bill or whatever it might be, or water bill, then it was easy for somebody to go say, can I get some money from you to help pay my utility bill for this month?
Right.
And that's what's kind of thing. In the summertime and springtime, probably about 8, 10, 12 houses in the community always grew a garden. Everybody had their own individual garden, but their garden was shared, so we all had different things in the community. So basically, we had our own garden vegetable garden that we took care of each other.
Right.
And then because we all came from a semi-country environment, came from different areas, what we call sometimes plantation type environment, then we knew how to take care of cooking. I got this cooking thing in my soul, right? How to cook. How to cook.
Right.
And so that was unique in itself. But I also coming up, I learned to be cautious and be careful of making sure that the elderly in my neighborhood was taken care of. I always made sure that if a person down the corner at the end of the block, at the end of the road, they needed their grass cut, they needed me to go to the store for them, they needed me to come and fix them something in the house or try to do things. As I got older, I learned to do those kind of things from both my stepfather, how to repair things, as well as my uncles and things. So I started learning hands-on stuff at a very young age. And then as I got older, my mom started letting, because my mom was a maid for a long, long time. So she would leave early in the morning, go clean these white folks' houses, and she wouldn't get back home sometimes till late in the evening. So eventually I learned how to cook. So I started preparing small meals and stuff, so when she got home, then she wouldn't have to worry about trying to cook again.
Were they as small as the ones you cooked yesterday?
Even I had to cook and it was 6 to 8 people.
So that's how you.
That's right.
That's why it's still the same spirit that it carried over from them days, right?
And to me, it was all soul food, but we didn't necessarily call it soul food at the time.
Right.
But most of the things that we live off on the lamb. Yeah. There was chickens. We had our own fresh eggs. We had chicken. Yeah. There were people in the neighborhood that had their own pigs and things. There were times of the year that especially when we go to the country, that we'll kill our own hogs and stuff like that, and then we'll take care of family. It was a different kind of environment growing up in. So with that.
So you had the smokehouse in the back.
Actually, my grandmother in the country had a smokehouse. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I learned how to barbecue and stuff like that as well.
My dad was from East Texas, so we have a bunch of property in Marshall, so I've seen all that what you're talking about.
Yeah. And those kind of things that you really don't, when you're growing up, you kind of think about and say, Lord, when I can get out of this, I ain't never going back to this anymore. But in your mind, those things stay with you.
That's right.
And then as you get older, you kind of start reflecting on some of those things. Yeah. I had a grandmother, one of my grandmothers, and she was so unique as far as making sure that I knew how to cook from scratch. She was the one who, because my original father and I, we weren't very close, but it was because my grandmother who made sure that we stayed knitted together, because I had other sisters that was on the outside, but my grandmother made sure that we was a family, that there was my stepsister, my outside sister, those was my family.
That's right.
And my grandmother would bring us together often to her house, and we would spend the summer together and do things like that. So from that, I learned how to uniquely bring my family together, because I've been married a couple times, and I had different kids, stuff like that. So I want to make sure my kids understood, my children understand, is that now this is not your half brother, your half sister.
That's right.
This is your brother, your sister,
right.
And y'all have to learn to take care and watch over each other.
That's right.
So that was part of my upbringing as far as in Mississippi. But one thing I found out as well, that during the 50s, probably just a couple years before I was born, one of my aunts, she moved from Vicksburg to Chicago. As a matter of fact, a lot of my mom's siblings, they moved to Chicago. They either Chicago or New York. And when my grandmother passed away, she did not come back to the funeral. She refused to come back to Vicksburg because of what was going on in the environment she was growing up in. I had uncles the same way. They refused to come back to Mississippi because, again, the thing that they experienced, keep in mind, they was born in the early 1915, 1918,
Oh, yeah.
1920s.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you seeing that, and
Yes.
the stuff was passed down to them.
Yes.
So that's why when they got to a certain age, they moved out of Mississippi, Vicksburg, and moved to Chicago or to New York. So as I got older and getting to know my aunts and uncle, I even took on the responsibility of taking care of them, making sure that they was taken care of, even though it was in Chicago or New York. If they had stuff going on in the family, when I got old enough as an adult, I would travel up there to making sure if they were sick, being with them. When someone would pass, the responsibility would we cast on to me, making sure that all of the stuff was things was taken care of like that. So that became part of me. Also, my mom taught me how to take care of bills. So they would bring the income in, and at a young age, I would look at what bill was going to get paid. So that's how I learned to do financing and household responsibility. So a lot of those things were taught to me as a child, as a young man, as a teenager, and I was not aware I was being trained like that. And one last thing I need to really make it important. A lot of times I did not have a lot of time to play in the community because I was always doing things in the community. So when it came to sports, and you know, right now I can't tell you nothing about any sport. I was not a sports person. I was more of a person who took care of the family, took care of the neighborhood.
Right.
And I learned how to work at a young age. I think at 15, I saved my money and bought my first car at 15. At 16, between 15 and 16, I went to North Carolina, called North Kakalaki, to work on a tobacco farm.
Really?
And it was like 3 busloads of us went from Vicksburg to go to work on this tobacco farm.
And you chose to go, or you?
I chose to go because you were looking for the summer jobs, programs that they don't have anymore. So you had summer jobs, and some of those summer jobs meant that you went off to other states to work. And one of the places that they had needed help with workers for as working on a tobacco plantation.
Wow.
So I went there that summer. One summer, I think, I'm gonna say about closer to 16.
So kind of what year we talking?
Ooh, Lord Jesus. Probably around about 72. It's around about 70, early 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, when I went to the tobacco, and it was different because you knew how to pick cotton.
Right.
Or I knew how to pick cotton.
Right.
You knew how to pick cotton, but never
The tobacco.
tobacco. So it's like 3 busloads went from Vicksburg. Of that 3 busload, after the first week, probably about a third had left. That first week and a half. That second week or third week going into it, it was only like a busload of us that was still left. Now we went to different plantations to work, but we would actually meet on the weekend to buy little supplies at the little town downtown in North Carolina. So, but at the end of that summer, because it was like 2.5 months, 3 months, at the end of that summer, it was probably less than a half a busload of us that actually stayed the entire time and came back. But that was a unique experience going to North Carolina and experiencing racism and prejudice in North Carolina that you knew about it in Vicksburg, you knew about it in Mississippi, but now you're going to other states and you're seeing how other people actually felt about you when you walking down to the street and stuff like that. So
And you grew up, moved to Dallas, and saw it all over again.
Dallas was way down the road because before I even moved here, because I had to be coached, and we talk about that later about my professor at Jackson State University. So that was the furthest thing out of my mind as far as moving to Dallas.
Really?
That was not on my agenda at all. Yeah.
So once you left, so some of the things that you mentioned in terms of, obviously you really didn't have time to play because you were really an adult seemingly at a young age, or you had to do a lot of adult things at a young age, but you became a caretaker, right, at a very young age. And then so you cooking, you paying bills, and you literally taking care of people physically.
Yes.
Sounds like, right?
Yes.
So all of those things would be in your DNA that would lend itself to how it seemed as though you understood and had an appetite for service and community at an early age. So if those are those early teen years, where'd you go next in light of what your experience was?
Once I turned 18 years old, I went to my mom and said, it's time for me to go. And my mom looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, it's time for me to go. I'm 18. She said, but you still got, I think I had like 3 more months in high school. And I said, I know I've been looking into it, and I'm joining the military. And I'm going to join the Army, and they told me I can finish my high school education in the military. I said, so that's what I'm going to do. And of course, my mom was against it, and but again, because being understood that I was an adult at 18, I understand that she allowed me to make my decision, so I joined the military at 18 years of age, was 1978, and went into the Army. It was a totally different, unique experience because I almost got kicked out the first 2 or 3 weeks that I was there.
Is that right? I wonder why.
Because in the military, it's structured.
Yeah.
Now, I can talk about that later, but it's structured. And one of the things that mentality was, they try to break you down.
Of course. That's
they
what
want to reform you to be fit into their group mentality. It was like several weeks that I was there, and we had what we call barracks duty. And in barracks duty, they choose different soldiers at that time
to clean the barracks.
and to not only clean the barracks, but you was responsible for cleaning the barracks, but we call a barrack watch at nighttime. So you had two different shifts during the night. So starting roughly about 8 o'clock, you had a shift, and then it was going until the early morning to around about 5 o'clock when we woke up in the morning time. Well, someone didn't show up. Someone must have went AWOL, I don't know. But my sergeant came to me and said, Private Allen, get up, you got barrack watch. I said, no, I don't. He said, get up, and started yelling at me. So I got up, got dressed, and I started, it ain't my night to pull barrack watch. It's not my night to pull barrack watch. So I started talking and stuff like that. And you obey what your sergeant told you to do.
Right.
And I keep in mind, this is in 1978.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. So I got dressed up like that, and I got mad. If I got to get up, everybody got to get up.
Right.
Now the barracks was 2 floors. That's the old barracks in South Carolina, one of them. So I woke everybody up in that barracks that night. I woke everybody up, and it had to be around about 1-ish something in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. So I woke everybody up. That next morning, I got called to captain office. The sergeant took me over there and reported me, and the captain had me to sit down, and he started giving me a chastisement lesson. He said, I can get you for being insubordinate. I can kick you out of the military. I can send you to, at that time, I can say jail, wasn't a proper word, but I can send you there. And we started to talking. He said, and this was a white captain, he said, Private, I'm not gonna kick you out. I'm not gonna do anything to you other than you're gonna have KP duty. KP was kitchen duty. He said, but if you get in any more trouble, he said, you're out of here. And I said, well, thanks, Captain. So he said, don't ever let this happen again because it's never happened on my watch before. And he said, so I think you can make it, but again, you have to understand you have boundaries. So that was how I started in the military. And that again in 1978 when I went.
So what we keep seeing is obviously a thing.
No, I'm sorry, it was 1972.
1972.
1972 when I went to the military. I'm
Right.
sorry, yes.
Right. So this theme of resistance. One, you had already been a protester when you was young. You had obviously. That's why when you said you had gotten almost kicked out, I figured because it had to be because you were an individual who was not looking to be made or find identity in the Army.
Yes.
So let's fast forward just a little bit. I know there's some pieces in between that, but what ultimately? So you obviously have a former military experience, which obviously those who serve as police officers, a lot of them are former military. So how did you end up in Dallas, and talk about your experience coming into the Dallas Police Department? Because I think that's extremely important to know.
Well, back up just a little bit. When I came out the military, I stayed from 1972 to 1974. And I came back to Mississippi, came back to Vicksburg, and I said, okay, I had a GI Bill, I'm going to school, I'm going to go to school to be a welder. Welder made good money in 1974, 75, especially 70, 75. So I'm going to school to be a welder. I got my certification. After several months, went on that barge. That day was July, and probably about 1975, late 1970, July 1975. And I went on that barge. Came lunchtime, I told that guy, you can keep my check, I quit. It was hot on the Mississippi River.
Right.
in July, and you got a welding
And
torch.
welder.
It was hot. I quit. I was told, at that time went back, I said, I got to find me another career field.
Yes.
So Winn-Dixie Corporation came to Vicksburg and they started hiring. So I went out there and applied for the job. They said, the only thing we have is a bag boy. And I said, but you look at my experience, also as part of my experience coming up, I work at a grocery store. A Jewish guy taught me in the grocery business. I think I was like about 13 or 14 when he hired me. He taught me everything about the grocery business, from how to be a cashier, to how to stock, to how to work the meat department, how to cut meat, how to stock the shelf, how to run the cash register, how to close. He taught me everything. So I had all this resume, plus my military experience, and they said, the only thing we got is a bag boy. I said, okay. I took that bag boy position at Winn-Dixie Grocery Store. It was a large corporation in Mississippi at the time. And in 6 months, I became assistant manager at that store. 6 months. But in the meantime of doing that, I also decided to go back to school and get my associate degree. I wanted my bachelor's degree, but I said, let me get my associate degree first and then go to Jackson State and get my bachelor's degree. So with that, I started my education. And then what happened in the process, once I got my associate degree at Hines Junior College, I started going to Jackson State. Now, I was doing all this while I was still working full-time, but I was going in the evening, taking 2 and 3 classes sometime every evening. And that's how I met Dr. Jimmy Bell at Jackson State University. Oh, he was the criminal justice professor. And I started taking criminal justice as an alternative because I was going into social work. And I had taken some biblical classes as well, trying to see what I wanted to do.
Right.
I went on preacher though. So the strangest part about it is that once I met Dr. Bell, and he was over the criminal justice program, we became real close as far as conversation and talking and stuff like that. And after about a year and a half at Jackson State, that's when the Dallas Police Department came to recruit. They came to recruit in Mississippi because there was a group of black officers in Dallas who were from Arkansas, from Louisiana, and from here in Texas. And they belonged to the Black Police Association, and they said you weren't hiring, they was intentionally not hiring black officers. So they said, if y'all think y'all can do better, then we're gonna bring y'all up to personnel and let y'all start recruiting. So these black officers went to different black universities and started recruiting black officers. Yeah, and that's how, when they came to Jackson State, Dr. Bell told me that I should go and apply for the job. And I said, I don't think so. He said, no, I think you really should go and apply for the job. At least just go out there and see what they had to offer. So I came out here, and that's when I applied to be a police officer. And I went back and told him they're not going to accept me. He said, why you say that? Because I'm too militant. I'm not going to abide by what they tell me. He said, no, but that is your calling. That's what you need to do. And you really need to consider this. I said, but Dr. Bell, I got this career at Winn-Dixie. He said, James, you really need to consider that. So it was because it's his encouragement that I would continue my criminal justice program. And that's why after that, they accepted me, semi-accepted me. Went through all the process because it's a long drawn out process.
Yeah.
And when they did my background investigation, not my background investigation, because they used to go to your different cities. They interviewed every single person in your neighborhood. They went to your high school. They went to your junior high school. We call them junior high in Mississippi. They went to your elementary school, and they talked to everybody that you knew. And I was not aware of how deep they went into their background.
And this year is when?
This right here was in 70. I was hired in 78, first part of 78. So it had to be like February, March of 78. Maybe February, March or May 78 when they did all that. So cutting through the chase, they finally hired me. I went down to personnel, and everything was looking good. And then they tried to wash me out because of the polygraph examination. And they said the polygraph examination, this white guy said, you didn't do well on that. So of course, what are you talking about?
Right.
You just didn't do well.
Right.
So of course I walked out there in personnel division, downtown Dallas, screaming at the top of my voice, this is racist, ain't nothing but prejudice down here. They said, y'all don't want us here in the first place. And a couple of blacks said, James, cool down, what's going on? I said, he gonna tell me I failed the polygraph. I said, I ain't pissed, I did not fail no polygraph. So I got really, really upset. He said, hold on. So they went back there and said, what are you talking about? The black guys came back to me, the black recruiters came back and said, you passed the polygraph. He just said that to see how you was going to react. And so that's how I became a police officer and started going to the academy in October, I think, in 1978.
So how many blacks was on the?
Strange enough, when my class went through, we was the largest black recruit class, the largest, only eight black police officers.
The largest.
The largest.
So you know
in the
Brother
history.
Bilal?
Who?
Brother Bilal?
Yeah, he came a little bit later. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I knew Brother Blair. I knew a lot of guys especially from the South and from different parts of the South. So we became a real close knit group, especially because of the Black Police Association. So it was interesting when I first joined. And again, here's again, I didn't think I was going to make it because of what I had did.
Right.
But I did make it.
Right.
And then I almost got kicked out the academy too. Because in the academy, it was like 8 of us, and maybe 9, but I know 8 because about 5 of us still around. Several passed away since then, but it was 8 of us, and we was real close. And they asked us all. The class consists of about 30. If I'm not mistaken, about pretty close to 30. And they asked all of us to stand up and introduce ourselves. I don't know where this came from. I stood up. I said, my name is James Allen, and I'm a black Jew from Mississippi. Seriously. I said, I don't know where it comes. I'm a black Jew from Mississippi. Ooh, did you see them folks' face when I said that? And they continue and I mean, everybody's telling their story and stuff like that. Afterward, they called me to the office, and I had one of the black actually 2 of them. Calvin was there. One of the guys who recruited me, 2 of the people that recruited me was there because they evidently had called them.
Right.
And then had the sergeant that was there, and there was the lieutenant, and they called me to the office and they said, why would you say that you're a black Jew? I say, because I grew up in a neighborhood. I had a Jewish person who was very Jewish, and I felt real close to him and stuff like that. I say, so that's why. And they said, well, you can't say that anymore. I said, what was wrong with that? They couldn't justify it. So they left, the 2 white people left out. Calvin, the sister, said, Jane, man, let's keep it down. Let's keep it low key till you get out of here. Because we need you, man. We need you. Brother, let's keep it down till you get out of here. I said, okay. So in the process, I said, when can I join the Black Police Association? I'm still in the academy. Jane, wait till you graduate. Wait till you graduate first. Right. And so that's how I almost got kicked out the police. The second time I almost got kicked out the police department. So it was interesting on the process, but I did stay in there. I did make it. We lost about 2 recruits in that police academy, so the rest of them came really, really close and said, we're not going to lose anyone else. And we were studying, but we started taking study very, very seriously at the time because we understood is that their intent was to wash as many of us out as they possibly could.
Yeah. So speaking of that, speak to what happened, what I believe once you all graduated, when one of the officers made you aware of the fact that obviously you had completed that process, but they still had another level of power inside of that department, which is what functions inside of many police departments in the United States, which again is why we've seen, right, the amount of terrorism that has taken place within communities based on police.
One thing is I was fortunate enough that I had the black officers that recruited me, and they really gave me a really rundown of the racism and the prejudice that existed within the Dallas Police Department. And they said, it's really not that much of a difference than you coming from Mississippi, and we understand it. Our goal, our purpose is that we want to tear down the system, and we want our black communities to be treated fairly. And as they broke that down to me, that's why it's important that we get as many black officers as we can, because we want to show them is that our community is going to be treated fairly regardless of the way the system is. Because black officers at that time were not allowed or was restricted to go to different bureaus and things at that time. So we was limited at that time where we would go. Every person that came out of the academy, for the most part, you would actually go to patrol, and you spend most of your time in patrol. So with that, you started learning the inner workings, and especially me, because I started learning, trying to figure out the inner workings of the Dallas Police Department, and how, as you start, even as not only as a sergeant, but those white officers who thought they were superior to you,
Right.
they feel that they could tell you what to do and how to do it. And so the key thing is that when you know the departmental rules and regulations, all the directives, and you know them, because that becomes your Bible. When you know that, then they can't tell you anything. So I learned that. I learned the code of conduct, rules and regulations. I learned everything. So when they try to tell me something, I said, no, that's not right. So I would challenge them right then and there on the spot when this was wrong. So I was blessed or fortunate enough to have a white guy who did not have that mentality, who trained me. Matter of fact, I was blessed with 2 trainers, and they did not have that mentality, and they was treated me fair, and they knew that, well, when I told each one of them, I said, I want to learn to do this job. If I mess up, then you stop me when I'm messing up, when we're going on calls and stuff like that, because you're a trainee, you're a rookie. So they train you how to do the job.
Right.
So they allowed me to just do my job. Well, I was fortunate because I also had a few moments. I mean, I had about a year working as an intern in a police department in Edwards, Mississippi, before I came to Dallas.
Really?
So I knew the structure on law enforcement.
Wow.
That's another story too.
Absolutely.
But because they allowed me to do my thing, and it was very rarely that I made a mistake. And when they would critique me, and I would ask them, okay, tell me what I did wrong, tell me what I did right, and how you handle everything. So I was able to finish training early. Normally the training is like 3 to 4 months. Because I had a little bit of experience and stuff like that, I was able to finish training a little bit earlier than everybody else. So with that, by being there, most black officers at the time was transferred to South Dallas. That's where you needed a black officer. So my first tenure was in South Dallas. And I love South Dallas. Now, one thing about being a police officer is that I learned from the previous heads is that they were not allowed at that time, before I came on, to change their uniform at the police station. They had to change their uniform over there on South Hall Street, Old Hall Street, just don't exist anymore, Old Hall Street. They had to change their uniform over there.
Really?
They were not allowed during that time period. We're talking during the 60s and up to the early parts of the 70s, probably up to the 70s, they were not allowed to arrest white folks.
I was getting ready to ask you that.
Yeah.
Yes.
In Dallas.
In Dallas.
Yes.
You had to, if there was something going on with a white
had to
citizen that
call.
you came in contact with, you had to call another white officer out there, and they made the decision. And that white officer came out to make the decision, and many times they would let
them
that
go.
white person go,
Yeah, I heard
most of the
that.
time. So that was going to, especially during the 60s, and that first part of like 70, 71, and things started changing. Some say 70s, because Calvin comes in 74. So 70, 71, 72, that's the issues they ran into. When I came on in 78, the barriers were some of them being torn down, because a lot of things had happened, from a Hispanic being killed and the ribbon bottom by white officers, almost a riot that took place in 75 or 76.
So the Panthers were the Panthers relevant during this time?
The Panthers became relevant to me during the 78, 79 when I came.
Right.
And that's when I started getting involved with the Panthers, and they call them and that's where I met Vincent and other
Gotcha.
Black Panthers, and they in return, they accepted me as who I was,
Right.
because when I got off work, first of all, I stayed in the black community. I had an apartment over there off of Oak on Ledbetter and Houston School Road. That's where I stayed for the first year. So I stayed there in the community, and I worked in the community. And when I got off work, I went out and partied. I used to party.
The people knew you well. That's what you said, right?
I went out and party. So you getting off at 11 o'clock at night when your shift
Right.
ends. So you going clubbing over there off of Bear Street. You going clubbing over there off Hall Street. You going over there off Martin Luther King. You going over off Oakland. So you going over there, and you out of your uniform, but the people
They
know
recognize
you.
Yeah.
Because you've been interacting with them all day long for the most part. So they was comfortable with you, and I was comfortable with them.
So you hung out the Green Parrot?
I did. I hung out a whole lot of places. I got in trouble too, but I hung out a whole lot of places. But again, that was my environment.
Yes.
And because that was my environment, then I felt comfortable. And I never got into a situation, even at the beginning of my career, is feeling uncomfortable around black people,
Right.
feeling uncomfortable in a major incident, be it a shooting or stabbing or a gang fight, stuff like that. I never felt uncomfortable if I was there by myself, because I met so many different people in the community that would have my back. And that's starting when I first hit the street. I'm gonna say around about 1979, because again, like the tenured in the academy, so it was probably around about the summer of 1979 when I finally hit the street. So I felt comfortable. So with that, we moved forward, and over the years, again, when I first graduated from the academy, one of the first thing I
Tell
did.
that story about the grand wizard of the KKK.
When I first joined the police department, first thing I did, graduated from the police department, from the academy, I joined the Texas Peace Officers Association. It was the black police organization. And it was a handful of those black officers that had formed their own organization, because the white association didn't want to address their needs or our needs. So there was a division, and they wanted everybody to join the white police association. But when they formed the black police association, they had issues with that. And at that time period, we also accepted Hispanics into the black police association. So there was a minority group.
Right.
And we was a large vocal group. So we started learning at a young age as an organization. You have to know the community. You have to know your community leaders. You have to know those individuals, not only just elected officials, but business leaders. You had to know those individuals who had a voice and a clout.
Yes.
Right.
So that's for a whole, from 1979 up until like 1982, 83, I started learning the system, on how the system worked, the police structure worked, and how you go into the system and address those issues. But I also started learning from the political aspect of it, how you connect with certain people within the community from a political standpoint as well. So with that allowed me to eventually to be elevated, to accept the position of being a board member in a Black Police Association, to eventually in 1987 I became the president of the Black Police Association.
Wow.
So it is a lot that I'm leaving out, but at the same time is that was the basic structure on going from coming from Vicksburg, Mississippi, going to Jackson State, coming to the Dallas Police Department, joining the academy, and going to the community to work in the black community. And I did that in the black community, stayed there until around about, I talked with Vincent Hall, and there was, started protesting and demonstration because there was, blacks was being treated unfairly within the community still. The community was being totally treated unfairly. And you could see that a lot of times, whereas white officers come out there and make arrests unnecessarily, or started getting into a fight with someone unnecessarily. You can see the diversity as far as still exists within the police department, and there was the lack of voices and stuff like that. So when I started interacting with Commissioner Price and Vincent Halls, and at the time they called the Warriors, and they decided that we had done everything that we possibly could as far as a black organization, filing complaints against the police department, filing lawsuits. We filed 5 different lawsuits against the police department as an organization. Won 3 of those 5 lawsuits. We filed those lawsuits, and then we asked for a congressional hearing into the activities of the police department. And when we started asking for the congressional hearing, that's when we got on board with other community leaders, especially Commissioner Price, and we all joined together, and they led, the leaders of the Black Police Association, along with Commissioner Price and others, led the dynamics to have an investigation into the police department. So that took a while and stuff like that to do, but eventually it got to that point. And that at somewhere during that time period is when I got fired too from the Dallas Police Department.
Really?
Yeah, I got fired. Yeah.
So say something about that story, and then I know we didn't went over, but
Yeah, I
tell
know, I'm
that
sorry.
story, because of course we know we gonna have to sit down again. But
Yeah.
but share that story if you don't mind.
What happened is that I was working in South Dallas at the time, and I was president of the Black Police Association, and I was told unexpectedly that I was going to a training for 2 weeks somewhere down towards San Antonio, between Austin and San Antonio, but I hadn't signed up for any kind of training. Whatever they was trying to get me out of the city because I was scheduled to testify for before the congressional hearing
Against the Dallas Police
against the police department. And so I could not disobey an order, so they said, you going to the school. So I went to this, I said, okay. So I went to the school, and that Friday, they always release you early when you go to kind of training. So I went to my instructor and I said, can I take my test early? And I told him, I said, because I want to go back to Dallas because I'm scheduled to testify before the congressional hearing. And he said, well, I'm going to release everybody about 11 o'clock anyway. He said, yeah, you can go ahead and take the test. So he released me around about 9 o'clock. So I drive back to Dallas, about a 2-hour drive or so, get back to Dallas, and I walk up in that courtroom where the congressional hearing was being held. And when them white folks looked around and saw me, man, they face dropped. They didn't know what to say or know what to do. So I sit there, and they did not call me to testify after I had made it back. But once 2 weeks was up, then they started an investigation as me saying I was AWOL from my school, and I had filed a false police report. So they did the investigation, and my sergeant told me, you're just gonna get a white copy, that's all you're gonna do. And I said, you get a day or two off, I said, and I'm arguing with them. So when the investigation took like about a month, went down to I was scheduled to go, I did go to a police conference that was in New York. So we were supposed to leave that Friday. The group of us, the Black Police Association, were leaving that Friday. So since they called me to the chief office that Friday at 10 o'clock, something like that, I said, well, guys, y'all go ahead. I'll catch up with you later. Because I'm thinking he's going to give me a white copy. When there 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, I guess they said, I looked at what your sergeant said, I looked at what your lieutenant said, I see what the captain said, but we're going to have to let you go.
Wow.
What you mean? You terminated. I need your ID, I need your badge, I need all your equipment. So I had to go home, because I had all my stuff in the car, and my wife and I, we was going to the police conference in Buffalo, New York.
Right.
We're going to Buffalo. So I went back home, got all my stuff, gave it to him. My wife said, what you gonna do? I said, I'm going to the police conference. I said, ain't nothing I can do now. Got in our car and we drove to Buffalo, New York to the police conference. And so once I got back, after that 2 weeks going to the conference and stuff, I was also in the military. I was a reservist in the military. My commander had heard what happened with the city. And he called me to the office. He said, Sarge, he said, I understood what happened. He said, now, ain't no way you're going to be AWOL. And he said, so that's a bunch of bull right there. He said, so, and you definitely ain't going to falsify no report because you have millions and millions of dollars every month in finances. He said, so that's a bunch of crap there. He said, if you want to come active duty, then I got a situation you come active duty until you get all this straightened out. So I went back on active duty for about 60 to 90 days until the city straightened all that out. And Congressman Conyers, who was at that time over the congressional hearing, found out what happened. He contacted the city and said, if I found out there's a retaliation, and if I have to come back down there and say, you're gonna have hell to pay. And this came directly from him. And he told me, don't worry about it. About, like say, 30, 60 days later, I'm saying, no, 60 to 70 days later, they called me back and said I was reinstated. So I got my job back as a police officer in I want to say like, that's 87, 88. And when I returned, of course, I could not go back to South Dallas,
Right.
South Oak Cliff. They transferred me to Northwest Highway after where all the white folks were.
That's right.
I had no problem. I went out there treating white folks just like they were black people. I would go talk to them. I schedule community meetings with them. I meet with the business owners. I meet with the apartment complex. I would meet with everybody the same way I was doing when I was in Oak Cliff, same way I was doing in South Dallas. Them white folks love me. when I say love me,
Yes.
they appreciate me because they said they never had anybody to do this before.
Not even the white officers.
Not
of
even the
course.
white officer.
Right.
Not even the white officer. So I became real close to them, and they hated for me to leave when I told them I'm transferring out. I was out there about 5 years, so they hated for me to leave. But that's when I came to transferred to West Dallas. Because again, there's a lot of things that went on. I'm sorry, I can't, time to go through all of it.
I know.
But it gets so much.
I know. I know.
know.
So last thing, I swear, I promise. But the piece that I wanted you to end on was this whole notion of community policing. Because the conversation around how officers engage our community or disengage what was clear seemingly about the Black Police Association members, can just speak to a little bit of how you all understood your role, because you spoke to, in one regard, I'm from the people, they see me kicking it with them, right? So there was seemingly like, I put on the uniform, but I'm also not othering you as somebody Black because I now got on the uniform, and y'all about to see me kicking with, I'm drinking, which, I mean, we in community together. So can you speak to what you all understood about what it meant to really protect and serve Black people in those uniforms?
I'm going to make it real easy. It was Chief Lee Brown out of Houston, Texas, who came with the concept of community-oriented policing. Chief Lee Brown started spreading this concept, and as Black officers, we would go to different cities and things to meet several times a year. And one thing about our organization, we would go to different cities and states and help them form Black Police Association. And what we had learned from Chief Brown is that community-oriented policing was that concept basically where you get out there and you interact with the community. You don't separate yourself and stay in that patrol car all day. You get out there and you walk in the neighborhood, you go meet the people, you go to the schools, you go to the churches, you go to the business owner. So that's what you call community-oriented policing concept. So we took that concept that he had told us all about, and when I say he told us, meaning the Black Police Association, we tried to bring it back to Dallas, that concept. They chose not to accept it. So what we did, some of us as Black officers who was out there working the street, we started implementing the program ourselves in the community and started on our own time, on our off time, on our lunch time and stuff like that. We started going to the different locations, the churches, be it the schools, the things I call it, meeting with community leaders, stuff like that, and we started talking to them and bringing those groups together. And we took the responsibility and saying, I know what the department is, I know how you're being treated, but we want to bring about that change. So that's how we call it community-oriented policing, came, but Dallas didn't want that title, so they changed it to ICP, Interacting Community Policing. So they didn't want Chief Brown name, so they say ICP instead. So we took that ICP concept, and then we started encouraging Black officers to join ICP. But the key thing about that, understanding those Black officers, they had to be committed to the community and not just want to go over there to make it a laid-back, easy job, because you could easily be a laid-back, easy job. And so one of my responsibility was, when I finally got transferred to a particular unit, I also made it clear, I'm not working with no white folks. I'm not going to do it. I'll get refused. and I told one of the Black deputy chiefs this, I'm not doing it. But James, you can't do that. I ain't going to tell you his name. you just can't do that. And I said, I'm not working with no white folks. I'm not doing it. And that's after I had gotten fired and came back.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's when I went to Southwest. So he gave me a Hispanic sergeant, because I wasn't working on white. When I said white ball, he gave me a Hispanic sergeant, and I worked by myself. So I took that ICP concept, and over there at Keys Polk neighborhood, where the old church was, at 616 West Key, there was my beat. It was the highest crime area in the city at the time. In the city, it was the highest crime area. You had drugs, you had prostitution, you had gang activity, you had everything going over there in the area of Keys and Polk, within, I guess, 10 block radius, more or less. So I took that same concept, and I actually would park my patrol car, and I would call 2 or 3 Black officers and say, come meet me. They come over there, we fit a walk. Then we talking about, we fit a walk. So we get out of our patrol car in the neighborhoods and start walking in the neighborhood and getting to know the people and introducing ourselves and getting our cars and stuff like that. So that's how the concept of interacting with the community came about. And we took that same concept, and I think you probably heard before, is that years ago when Pastor Haynes was doing a revival at 616 West Key, there was a execution style at one of the apartment complex right there beside the church. And that was my beat. And that's how eventually I got to meet Pastor Haynes. And I went and told him is that this is what happened while you was having a revival that night. It was an execution, it was a drug execution style, and they put 2 guys in the bathtub, old style, and killed them. So after that, I became more active involved with Friendship West, and then I started being active involved with other churches in that particular area. But ICP, for me, branched out beyond just Oak Cliff in that area. I also went to West Dallas, started interacting with those individuals, introducing myself to the pastors over there. I came back to other parts of Oak Cliff over by Polk, over off of Ledbetter and Sunnyvale. Started arranging those churches over there, talking with those individuals. Started meeting with business owners. But when it's different when you're coming from a police mentality and you're saying, who I am, and I like to meet with you guys, and I said I'm going to invite some others to come, and we're going to talk. So that's how the concept got started as far as spreading in Dallas, and it was something that was very much needed, and the black officers who were participating, they started doing the same thing. So eventually, as you can see over the years, they moved away from ICP to NPO, neighborhood police officer, what they call it now. So that's what community involvement was about. That's how I got to know Commissioner Price, Diane Ragsdale, Al Lipscomb. I mean, when I came to SFA Higgins, she was still on the city council then. That's how I got to know all of those individuals, because I interact with the political arena as well. And that's when I always share this, that Commissioner Price and Vincent Hall always said, James, we don't need you out here demonstrating.
Right.
We don't want you out here protesting, walking the picket line with us. We need you on the inside. And that's right here when we were trying to get the congressional hearing and stuff like that. And so because I felt so involved, organizing the community, it was important for me to be out there on the picket line every day.
So you took that Mississippi upbringing and brought it in the community in Dallas.
I did. And again, unknowingly. So again, it was unknowingly, but I always say that it was something that was embedded in me that I did not even know. And I think over a period of time, God just kind of told me, that's why nothing ever happened to me. Because I honestly believe from a spiritual place, God always had his hands on me, and that's why he never let anything happen to me. I never shot anyone. I've always treated people fairly. I used to tell
you shot the white folks.
On a regular basis.
I used to tell the sisters who was, because young men used to prey on sisters that was getting money and stuff like that, staying in an apartment and stuff like that. I used to tell sisters, if you needed a way out, let me know. I give them my card. I say, if you wanted a way out, I will get you out of this situation with this guy. And that happened so many different times when the guy had beat up on them and stuff like that. And that became part of the community that was going beyond, but that became part of the community concept that Lee Brown was saying. You have to take an interest in the people in the neighborhood, not just the people that have money, not just political people, but the people in the neighborhood. You have to stay connected with them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much. Obviously, Corporal Allen, such a rich history, and thank you for giving us that backstory. But why, as I would tell Damon, and now hearing a lot of stuff that I learned, why it's so important when we talk about the officers who don't separate themselves once they put on a uniform, and how much more, I'm wondering, how much more of that story could be told that could really help current police departments now, if they really want to embrace that. But see, you all did something that was very much part of that organizing, subversive, right? Y'all kind of subversively did it, but the impact that it made. So again, we appreciate what you have done, and obviously how you've sown into this community and the way in which you put and prioritize black people and the other officers. So maybe one day it would be good to interest in how many of them are still living, maybe to get a conversation with the Black Police Association. That would be good. So
one thing I'd like to say this as well as a close out is that it's truly important is that if you're going to be, and we try to get the department, if you're going to be a police officer in any city, it's really important that you live in that community. Now, I know everyone can't live, but if you live in that community, your kids go to school in the community, you shop in the community, then that becomes a part of you. So that is so important, but the department never accepted that.
I wonder why,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
Well, we thank y'all for breathing humanity inside of a department and inside of a particular world that often seems to detach its humanity from its service to other humans. So, anything else, D?
Man, I'm still sitting there absorbing.
Yeah. All right, Corporal Allen, well, we thank you again, and hopefully this will be the first of maybe another conversation that we could have with you in
Man.
regards to your extraordinary life.
Anytime.
right,
I
all
enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it,
I
bro.
enjoyed you, man. Appreciate
Yeah.
you.
Another episode, another great one of Corporal Conversations. Thank y'all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Peace.